Welcome everybody to Lunar Alchemy. So excited to have you join us. My name is John. This is Bella. Hopefully you can see us both. I think I got us set up properly that way. And this has been quite a previous week. If you have been tuning in to Lunar Alchemy, you'll know that we've been going through the Ring of Alchemy. And over the past several weeks. And today we will be concluding that codon ring with the shadow of conflict in gene key 6. But I don't know about you, but this previous week was a pretty hefty a pretty hefty energy. Bella, did you notice that too?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to start on a dark note, but I don't ever think I've had so much death, around me. And I believe it started actually little by little. My mom's sister died in October last year, and then you lost your mother this year, John. And then I just feel like it's accelerated. And last week, Ashley lost her dog. I had two friends where their parents had died. Just it's everywhere, and I feel like, yeah, cancer and death is really everywhere. I have two friends, really close friends, that are both in treatment, like really aggressive treatment through aggressive tumors. And yeah, I don't, of course, transmutation is in all, it's in there, but I haven't seen this much death, and I don't think it's only because I'm getting older, but because the acceleration doesn't make logical sense, and I don't have an explanation for it. But that's really the kind of energies that I've been just seeing and feeling, and just kind of shaking my head at the last week.
Yeah, I feel as if what you're talking about, the way the way that the calendar flows from one hexagram into the next as the sun makes its way through the constellation systems. It's really quite incredible how deeply this movement of the solar transit and the reflections of the lunar cycles supports the development of our individual and collective evolutions. Last week, when we began looking at gene key 47, I remember feeling this intensity of the possibility that you might get into this one and find yourself in a place that doesn't feel so comfortable. And while I recognize that a lot of the evolution that's happening today amongst humanity is that we can walk through the challenges and the changes that are occurring around us in a higher vibration experience, I don't think that necessarily can be looked at as a mitigation for the intensity of the experience of walking through these processes. And when you are bringing up this, the prevalence that you're seeing of cancer and of deaths, it really speaks directly to this final gene key within the Ring of Alchemy and the shadow of conflict, because it has everything to do with the internal pH of the physical body, the acidity or the alkalinity that we're able to carry. And that environment is what allows for the proliferation of these types of cells. Aggressive tumors become much more aggressive in an acidic environment inside the body. If the body becomes alkaline to a certain degree, the tumor can no longer reproduce. So these kinds of awarenesses are starting to pop up in our medical science, and in our sort of looking at the psychosomatic aspects of our physical health. And yet at the same time, just having that awareness doesn't necessarily free us from the possibility that our bodies are going to move through these changes. You know, we may have we may be a very, very aware, awakened person who eats a healthy diet, who focuses on producing an alkaline environment inside, and we still may experience diseases like cancer. And that isn't only about what we're doing with our mental, emotional, and physical bodies. We have these layers of our being that sometimes require a deeper connection than maybe we have access to gain control over the state of our being. And as humans continue to evolve, I'm excited at the possibility that we will continue to gain more awareness over these layers. But right now, what's happening is we're becoming truly aware of how little awareness we have over these aspects of our being. The emotional material that lives within our subconscious and unconscious layers, the energetic pressure that we experience from our society. It's really quite an intense time. So yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to mention, if you're watching on Facebook or you're joining us in the membership webinar, let us know if you have Gene Key 6 in your profile somewhere. I'd love to see that, so we can direct our conversation to some of those specific areas. Sorry, Bella, go ahead.
No, I feel before we even look at the transits, there is something in the conversation that we are speaking about right now that I would like to show us, like look at in the charts, because there is something with this polarity with Virgo and Pisces that I'm like, that's kind of like just dawning on me. And I think I don't have, it says disabled participant sharing. So maybe.
Oh, hang on, I have to, I failed to do my co-host promotion duty.
So what dawned on me is that every year when we are in those gates, 37, 63, 22, especially 22 and 36, it's so, I feel it's so heavy. And we have dishonor and turbulence. This gate is called the darkening of the light. You know, and it's so heavy, and I don't have anything in my emotional center, and basically everything here is all the emotional center. So I always go through that whole month of Pisces, and I just, feel there's so much humanity in it. And I believe, like I've said before in Lunar Alchemy, that I've been so connected to spirit before. So the human realm was hard for me. And so I'm always like longing for the 25, which is that more spiritual love. And then I feel like, that heaviness of the humanness is a little bit off my shoulders. And I mean, I feel like, J-Lo, it's not like a coincidence that you're here today. You have birthed 8 daughters, whereof like several were birthed early. Like you have so much of that humanness of seeing having 8 lives grow up in your arms. And for me, that is the 36, and also the difficulties that you have had with that, the beauty of the humanity and the compassion and the honor and dishonor of all that, of the relationships, of being a parent, of all that. So what's dawning on me is that if we're speaking about programming partner, if we're speaking of like oppositions or polarity points to these gates in Pisces, they are actually in Virgo. And I believe that in an astrological sense, we often forget that we are in Virgo. We're like, oh, Virgo, that is mutable earth. And it's about fixing things and details and organizing and all that. And we believe somehow that that's what we're doing in the month that we are in Virgo. But actually, it has to do with that priestess energy that can go into form and transmute things in the body and alchemize things in the body before we have to go so far out here to the dishonor and the darkening of the night and the very deep doubt and the deep weakness that sometimes, you know, is poetic and beautiful in one way, but it's very out there in Pisces, that it's like the 12th house. It's the last energy before something new sparks. So what I am feeling right now is that I understand suddenly, by looking at the programming partners, the oppositions here, how actually powerful and how alchemical these keys are. It's almost like here we do it in the body, in the earth, and on more like the kind of more personal social part of the chart. And here it's completely transpersonal and it's spiritual. It's like already kind of beyond the body, more than the body can hold. So the only thing that can hold is grace. So there is something really powerful that I feel like I'm realizing, that's helping me also to understand the codon ring of alchemy that we're in right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really beautiful perspective on what it is that we're working through, and why over the past few weeks, the past several transits through 47, 64, and 40, we may have been experiencing a very deep and difficult trudging through the mud, so to speak, or the swamp, or having this feeling that there's this deep unsettling within us. And when we look at it from this perspective, this codon ring of alchemy allows us to literally transform the pathways of energy inside our being, to allow for those higher frequencies to move through us into our modes of expression. One of the most important aspects of this particular gene key 6 in the shadow of conflict is the pathway for our emotional energies and how we relate with those emotional energies. When we become identified, we equate our identity with the emotional experience that we're having. It produces instantaneously within us and outside of us this manifestation of conflict. And there are a number of partners for us who are going to show up in order to realize that degree of conflict that is going on inside of us as we identify with an aspect of our experience that is non-resonant with our true natures. So when we have these experiences of reactive emotional anger, fear, whatever those responses are, and we recognize ourselves as that, as justified as a being within that feeling, what's happening is we are forming an identity of ourselves that is non-resonant with our internal pure vibration, the one that we came into this body with. And that is the source of the conflict. And when that occurs, we have partners who come from the 36 with the shadow of turbulence. We have partners from within the 6. If we're a repressive nature, we attract the reactive nature to us, so that we can experience this internal rift that we are generating through our own sense of self. And what we see throughout society and throughout human history is the escalation of this process into the need for separation and defensiveness. So what ends up happening is we generate borders for nations. We put, there's that famous Robert Frost poem about Something there is that doesn't love a wall, about two neighbors who spend all of their time clearing their fields to farm, and they build a wall between each other with the stones that are in their land, and they're never able to meet because of that process. It's very innocent on its face, and yet the resulting conflict that it produces is a very deep source of suffering in our world. So, this particular transit and this period of moving through these Virgo gates with the sun is tremendously significant for the development of human consciousness and society as it stands right now, because these are the things that must be transformed in order to open up the possibility for the new way of being that is arising within our awareness. We have to deal with this sense of connection to the emotional waves that come through us and the suffering that produces them. So Bella, I'm wondering, for you, you're having this awareness around this relationship between the ring of alchemy and what's going on the opposite side of the map. What is it about, what do you see in this particular shadow of conflict that really stands out to you as being a key player in all of these dynamics that are happening?
I mean, there is something that we didn't speak about now, but the 36 and the 35, actually, let me continue to share a little bit. The 36 and the 35, it's a sexual tension. So we have the 35 in the throat that is hunger, and the 36 here. So when I speak about it in this sense with the codering of humanity and the codering of alchemy, I think we are looking more at the code rings and at the group of gene keys that are making that opposition, that polarity point between Pisces and Virgo. But if we go more, like you're saying now, like going into those shadow frequency of the 6 and the 36, these have to do with relationship with the opposite gender, or relationships like where there is more like a feminine and masculine pole. It doesn't necessarily have to be a woman and a man, but that's where there is an attraction. And it has to do with the program of like the program that Ra or Who speaks about, where genes just want something different so that the continuity of the species can continue. And the more different genes that we mix, the better we know that the outcome is going to be. So if we have very few rabbits on an island, they can start to degenerate because cousins and sisters and brothers start to have children, and then they come out without ears or with other disabilities. So there is something where the program wants us to have hunger to go out and seek a different kind of genes. And then on the other side, we have the 36 and the 6, that kind of like the 36 might be in for the adventure because it says, okay, some more turbulence. So it's the experimental way. This is collective circuitry. It's abstract. So it's not learning by logic. It's kind of learning by falling sometimes. It's the channel of transistoriness. So here you're in for the experience, but it not because the experience is necessarily good or there is a success. It's not about success and failure. It is about the wisdom that can be had when the experience is over. The same thing when we're looking at the 64 and the 47 where we were. This is abstract, and this is about going through things, and then we can put together the images, the experiences, and make sense of it, and then we can share it with other people in the collective, and then they can maybe move on in a way that is with a little bit more wisdom. So that's the 35 and the 36 that is activating now. The 6, actually is the one that puts up walls and says, I don't know if I'm in it for the experience. I feel like there is too much dissonance here. I feel like I should protect myself. So there is something interesting with the programming partners here, the 36 and the 6. And I feel at the end of the day, it's almost like every walls are false walls. That's what comes to me. Because if we are here for deep alchemy and deep transmutation and feeling so deep into our bones so that the light can start to crack through, then the 6 with its false walls, it's almost like a repression of not wanting to go there. It's being afraid of conflict. And what we know with the open emotional center is that the not self theme is avoiding conflict and truth. So in truth, we want the 6 to be able to go there. We call it the peacemaker in the 64 doors because it has that ability to feel the dissonance, but also probably when it steps in with the 36 and the 35, it can actually be that balancing quality. And it comes here right before Libra, right before the scales. It's almost like it's still a step back because it happens through that pH, that ability for the body to recognize the pH of the blood, for example, that needs to be so precise. And the 6 has that. But what I see, to go back to what you're saying about the shadow, it is this preventing yourself from living by protecting yourself with false walls and thinking that that's the way out, which is actually the way that's never going to allow the light to crack through.
Yeah, this conversation is one that I have been looking forward to for a very, very long time because of the other work that I do in this program, Awakening the Heart, that while I created it, it was more of a realization that occurred within me, not something that I invented or something along those lines. And this conversation is about the use of boundaries and how important it is to have what are referred to as healthy boundaries. And while even this discussion goes on within some of the gene keys, the other gene keys around generating the awareness of the agreements that we have with others that are acceptable to us and the ones that are not acceptable to us. And I don't want to say anything that disparages that awareness growing and becoming more prevalent in a person. We have to realize when mistreatment is occurring for us and be able to stand up for ourselves to say, this is not something I'm willing to be a party to anymore. That's extraordinarily important for a realization to occur. However, what often happens within that process is a new dependence upon the setting and creation of boundaries, and a lack of awareness that those very walls that are built up, energetically speaking, actually keeps us trapped within this lower frequency bandwidth. When we look at the repressive and the reactive natures of this shadow of conflict, the over-attentiveness is the example of this. When we become over-attentive, the words of the gene keys, to the repressive nature of this shadow of conflict, when we become over-attentive to the agreements that we make and our need to feel safe within those agreements, what ends up happening is we unconsciously project an energetic walling off from those that we experience as a threat to our well-being. And that threat is not necessarily perceived in a misplaced way. But it does arise from the genetic and individual traumatic suffering that we may have experienced. Whether or not we have direct emotional, physical, or mental trauma in our experiences our genes are still going to carry some form of that trauma. And based on that, when we project these boundaries into the world to say, oh, if you do this, you know, this is what's going to happen in our relationship. You know, if you step out of line in this way, you are going to get cut off from my attention. I'm cutting you out. And while that may in a certain way protect you from being aware of the wound that exists within, it won't stop you from continuing to attract those conflict partners. So when a person particularly is looking for a like a sexual partner or a relationship partner, and they find that despite these well defined boundaries, they keep attracting partners who are either dishonest or in some ways oversteps those boundaries, whether intentionally or unconsciously. It's because of the presence of that walling off that has occurred on an energetic level. So it's not that creating boundaries is a bad thing. It's just that there is an underbelly to it that produces consequences that can continue this pattern of conflict in our relationships. And that's why I think it's really significant that the 6 and the 59 are connected. Recently, we talked about the 59, and I said, that's my very favorite, very favorite gene key, because once this 6th gene key is unlocked and that gift frequency of diplomacy starts to permeate your awareness, true intimacy becomes possible for you, not only with a sexual partner, but with any partner that you choose. Because when we drop our defenses, which is the key to that gift of the 6, a magical thing happens where we are able to witness the defenses of others in total clarity. And because we're able to see it, we're able to bring ourselves into a state of being that is not going to agitate or create turbulence around those persons' protective measures. And it allows peace to manifest and gives permission within that relationship to allow those defenses to relax. Really an extraordinary, I mean, to me, that in itself, that process is such an alchemy and really makes me excited about what is possible through this particular codon ring. Just incredible in terms of its possibility to transform the world.
I guess when you were speaking, I was looking at the chart still and kind of asking myself as well, why is 6 still in, Earth sign and in Virgo? And, I feel like you are speaking in interpersonal relationship a bit. There is something also collective when we look at the world right now that is where there is a conflict and a division, and that is based with something that has to do with our bodies, because it's the health crisis, that has been impacting all our lives for almost 2 years now. So it has to do with the human body. And it's almost like for the first time, we really can feel like we're one body, because this virus is in the human organism. And now the measures that we are trying to take against it is also something that we need to do in the whole organism, not just in part of it. And yeah, I don't want to become political, but I understand that there is conflict when there is something imposed on a whole human organism, that where there haven't been a referendum around it, where there haven't been that human organism that comes together in unity and collaboration and say, this is the way that we, going back to what you said about the body before, this is the way that we want to treat the body. This is the solution that comes from a synergy of what this is. And today we have in the 41st gene key, which is fantasy, anticipation, and emanation, we have Saturn and the moon. And the moon, of course, is just gonna move through today. But it's kind of, it is strong because it's also in it's an intense aspect in a square to Venus and Scorpio, which is about death and depth, right? So there is something here with the gene key of fantasy, and Saturn is old structures, and then the moon is moving through. And I believe that what's that shadow frequency of fantasy? Like, how can we see that today with the things in our values that are maybe not serving anymore, that need a transformation? We have a square actually as well to the kind of the new, the unexpected, what's coming with Uranus. Like, there is something here with this last gate in Virgo, the mutable earth, which is the human body, because we are always changing everything and it's always moving. The way that we're doing the transmission, like, that's one of the most beautiful ways this year that I've been feeling how everything is energy. Even my soul, feels like it's part of the energy that's playing through our transmissions. And I feel like there is an important question here. Like, this is the old, but it's also the structures. We have Pluto here in the structures of the collective. So what is it that has the responsibility for the human organism and my own body, your own body? And how can we anticipate in the gift frequency of the 41 a future when we are honoring this human body, the alchemy of the human body, instead of potentially even changing it? Because we are using methods that we don't know long term what they are going to have for unexpected consequences. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's such a beautiful point to make. And the solutions that are going on, we can see in the United States, this subject is coming up in a number of different ways. In Texas recently, there was the laws around preventing abortions, the sovereignty of the body. In a variety of cities and places around the United States, mandates for vaccinations in order to go into certain places, private establishments that are accessible to the public. And to me, what this truly brings up the question of is, how do we drop our defenses and maintain the sovereignty of the body? When these threats haven't disappeared, it's not as if this pandemic is going to disappear tomorrow or even next year. It's going to stick around for a long time. And looking at this question, how do we drop our defenses when there are so many perceivable and credible threats in the world that surrounds us? It's a conundrum, because how can we, it doesn't make sense to drop your defenses unless the threat is gone. Unfortunately, the threat will never go away until the defenses are dropped. So how can we bring ourselves into a state where we can actually support both sovereignty and safety? How can we bring ourselves into a state that supports the trust that is required for those states to work as in an interpersonal way. And I see Cynthia raise her hand, and there's a couple of comments I want to get to. I do want to mention quickly before we do that, and we'll move into the next portion of Lunar Alchemy. With Bella speaking about where the moon currently is, we are quickly approaching a full moon. So that'll happen on Monday. And I haven't quite looked at the specific time. I assume it's Sunday night going into Monday, but it might be on the other end. Anyhow, Bella and I are going to host an open house on Monday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, so that you can experience the energetic component of lunar alchemy. For each discussion that we have every week, we also with our members engage in an energetic transmission, which is essentially the deliverance of a specific frequency that assists us with the process of evolution with the particular frequencies that are being activated through the movements of the sun and the moon. So we are doing that on Monday, partially also as a celebration for what is quickly, which isn't quite present, but you will be able to join membership with Lunar Alchemy through the Academy in Unlock Your Design. So that will be a new home base for Lunar Alchemy that I'm very excited to be part of all of the wonderful offerings that Bella has with her business partner Ashley through Unlock Your Design. And so from Monday's full moon session, hopefully we'll be able to offer you an opportunity to come in and join us for those energetic transmissions, because moving through each week by week and carrying each of these transits with you in a transformational energetic process is really one of the strongest ways that we can deepen the process of contemplation with the gene keys, that we can deepen our awareness that allows us to intuitively follow our strategies through human design, no matter what situation is occurring for us. So this is an extraordinarily powerful and complementary process. If you're involved in anything related to the gene keys or human design, I'm really excited about what we can do with that. Bella, any last comments for our Facebook viewers?
I believe these are times that we're never going to forget. And what you were saying before, the sovereignty of the body, the sovereignty of the human, now is more important than ever to really anchor down in that and feel that, because it's so easy to forget. And we are, I believe that we're sovereign. We are inherently sovereign. And that's just what feels, I could speak to it in a much more intense sense, but I feel like it's more powerful if we can find that still place of inner strength, of knowing that whatever goes on around us, we have that place inside of us.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that it is that we're doing with an exploration of the gene keys or human design or lunar alchemy is to gain a real experience through our bodies, that we know our own sovereignty, not simply that we know that a human body is sovereign in our mind, but that we embody sovereignty in our bodies so that our created experience reflects that truth rather than reflecting the shadows that we are often carrying instead. So beautiful point. So thank you for joining us. Those of you watching on Facebook, look out for some posts. You can join us live on Monday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a full moon session. We'll keep it brief, um, the session on that day, but you can experience it, and we'll have a special offer for you to join us more deeply through the Academy with Unlock Your Design. So we'll look forward to seeing you then.